So welcome to this third GCSE video, looking at the Component 1 theme, Issues of Life and Death. And in this topic, we are looking at the value of human life and why it's sacred, and if it's should be treated as sacred or whether it has a quality. At the end of this, you should be doing your topic tests, learning Quizlets for vocabulary and quotation, and practicing model essays from using the practice questions on the website. So core questions for this little bit. Could life have developed by itself? What is stewardship? A question we've looked at already. Are there different ways of understanding the scriptures? Does the unborn baby have a right to life? What lives of people are more valuable than those of animals? What is it your life to do with what you want? So let's think about this. Christians believe there is a divine mind behind all life. The universe is intelligent, intelligible, because there's an intelligence behind it, a mind. We think God's thoughts after him, as said Isaac Newton. Life is a product not of chance, but of a plan. It says in Psalm 139, "You knit me together in my mother's womb." That means there's a plan and a purpose for your life, for all living beings. But atheists and humanists say, not so. Life comes from life, not from God. There's no God who creates you, i.e. your soul. Catholics teach. Life is a result of blind chance, material, automatic processes of nature. Philosophers throughout history say this. French philosopher Jacques Monod said, "Man at last knows that he is alone in the unfeeling immensity of the universe, out of which he only emerged by chance. Neither his destiny or his duty have been written down. Natural selection has no purpose in mind, no vision, no foresight," says Richard Dawkins. So what does this mean? How did the world come to exist? Well, clearly for Christians, a powerful creator God is the source of all life. And the Bible tells this creation story in Genesis. So all Christians believe in the doctrine of creation, but they understand the way God does it differently. As we've said, literal and non-literal. Literal Christians believe the events in Genesis happened exactly as written in the Bible. Non-literal Christians believe there's some room for interpretation surrounding the stories in the Bible. They are myths that carry deep symbolic meanings, perhaps with or perhaps not with historical content. The Bible creation stories for some liberal Christians are complementary to and true alongside scientific theories, such as the Big Bang. Literal Christians, however, would see the Darwinian evolutionary theory and as an attack on their beliefs, as it implies that life is developed by chance. Also, if humans have evolved from animals, then there's no special place for them. What is the human soul? At what point did God gift us with a soul? Literal Christians see the Big Bang as denying God's power, and even if science can prove the Big Bang, we're still left with the question of what caused the Big Bang. Literalists might argue this was God. On the other hand, atheists like to quote Charles Darwin, like to quote the Big Bang. Well, it depends what you mean. Darwin was an agnostic. At the end of his life, he was probably a sort of deist, a sort of religious person in the middle of his life, and his move to agnosticism was probably because of the death of his daughter. But nevertheless, his theory is that life has arisen through the slow natural process of evolution, and therefore the Earth must be millions of years old. Well, okay, that contradicts young Earth creationism. The survival of the fittest is evolution by natural selection, those best suited to their environment. Notice it doesn't say mutation. That's a 1920s development by the peas of a priest, actually, in another priest in Mendelssohn's Peas in Austria, I believe it is. And we get the modern Darwinian synthesis, the theory of Richard Dawkins, perhaps in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, or one of his books. The Big Bang theory is thought to be an atheist theory, but it's not if you understand that the guy who invented it was a Catholic priest. Yes, the universe is 6 to 14 billion years old. It came from a singularity which expanded, and particles and atoms appeared. This led to the formation of stars and planets. Most Science will believe it will continue getting bigger and bigger. But it had a beginning, and that's an interesting idea. There was no particles, no magic before it. And so atheists have scrambled to give alternatives to the standard theory, such as the steady state model and so on, oscillating universe model and other models. So what do Christians in particular do with evolution? Well, here's Richard Swinburne. He is happy with thinking about a theistic evolutionary process. Darwinism can only explain why some animals are eliminated in the struggle for survival, not why there are animals and men at all. With mental lives of sensation and belief, insofar as it can explain anything. The question inevitably arises, why the laws of evolution are as they are, all this theism can explain. So why are animals and men there at all? On its own, Darwinism can't explain this. Evolution can't explain this. Theism can. Why does anything at all exist? He suggests this idea of the laws. The laws of evolution are laws. Yeah, with laws, you have to have a lawgiver. He suggests the survival of the fittest presupposes the arrival of it. I wonder what you think. Do you agree? Sort of a theistic evolution, or evolutionary creationism, or some sort of progressive creationism? Or what do you think are the chances of some sort of young earth creationism, as opposed to random chance? Stop the video and do some of your work, perhaps, or we'll move on. So what do Christians think about life? Life is a gift, and it's precious. As a result of what we've just talked about, life is a gift. It comes from God. God is interested in and involved in each human life. God only created each person unique, and in his image. You are made in the image of God. Adam and Eve were created together in the image of God. Only God can give and take life. Job says this. He's the one who gives and takes life. Blessed be his name. And this is perhaps the reason why Quaker Christians oppose the death penalty, because each person's life contains a reflection of the image of God, and taking any life would be wrong. A person's soul is sacred. Paul says in Corinthians, don't you know yourselves that you are God's temple and the Spirit of God dwells in you? Wow, we are the temple of God. You know, your body is a temple. That's where this comes from. God's Spirit. If anyone destroys the temple, God will destroy them. There's a warning that follows this passage. Catholics disagree with artificial methods of contraception. You've learned this in your relationships bit of your course. Creating babies in laboratories is outside of the act of sex is unnatural. It's playing God. It's therefore it's to be rejected as wrong, as immoral and unnecessary. Jesus showed that life should be valued. He intended a leper. He looked after a leper and visited the sick to show that all lives are worthy of respect and compassion. The book of Jeremiah, it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. So all of this points to a belief that Christians call the sanctity of life. Life is precious. It is sacred. And that human life especially holds this special status, not just any old life, not even animal life. Humanists, in contrast, want to argue for what they call the quality of life. Life is precious because it is the only life we have. We don't get another one. The value of life doesn't come from God. Our lives are valued because we only have one. There is no soul. They reject the idea of a soul or an afterlife at death. Central purpose of life, therefore, is to make ourselves and others around us as happy as possible. We benefit through others' compassion and kindness. Life is not sacred, but it's worthy of respect. We should pursue the highest, notice, happiness or quality of life. So what can we say in sum here? Most people, regardless of faith, believe human life is special and worthy of being respected. Ordinarily, most people say this. Belief in the sanctity of life has a large impact on medical ethics. So it's not just when life is ordinary, when it's difficult. We'll look at abortion and euthanasia in another video. The process of deciding what is right and wrong in medicine, especially with those which relate to creating or ending life-ending processes. So either IVF, abortion, or life-ending processes, euthanasia. All Christians and humanists debate over. For humanists, this is no problem. You can do this. For Christians, this is taking life, which is against the Ten Commandments. Do not kill, it says the sixth commandment. It's destroying God's temple. Quality of life, in contrast to sanctity of life, is the idea that we should measure the value of life by pleasure. The extent of pleasure, perhaps, is the extent of how meaningful or helpful your life is. Most people believe that the quality of our life is important, whether it's sacred or special. Life is free from pain and anxiety. We live with freedom and dignity, then we have good quality of life. But if we don't have these things, then we don't. How do we measure the quality of life? Well, there's no absolute standard. It's generalities that we talk about, which might include sort of the living conditions, health, education, leisure and social interaction, disability, levels of pain, whether human rights are granted. If a person's life has insufficient quantity and quality of these things, you would argue maybe you have a right to die, as in euthanasia. In medical ethics, treating an illness, it should be weighed against the extent to which they're going to live free from pain and suffering afterwards. Is the treatment as well cost worthy? On the right here, we can see a discussion about when life begins, which will be relevant to abortion. Does it begin at the moment of conception? Christians typically think it does, certainly Roman Catholics, when God ensouls a person. Does it begin when you're capable of feeling pain, roughly around 9 weeks? Augustine observed this. He called it the quickening, when babies first move at about 9 weeks. What about when the heart starts beating again? Actually, a little bit earlier, sort of 5 or 6 weeks. Life begins, does it begin at 120 days or 19 weeks, when the nervous system has fully developed? People think the nervous system, big parts of it, have largely developed before this. You can hear, you can respond at earlier stages. 24 weeks, we reach what's called viability. You can live outside the womb, and medical science is progressing all the time. Children survive from much before that. My niece was born at 23 weeks, premature. Or does life just begin at birth? What do you think? When does life begin? Stop the video, make your notes on the sanctity of life, the quality of life, issues around evolution, and how Christians understand evolution.